Hello again. Uh, just continuing my presentation of all these things in old age. Past 3-4 videos I have done on cardiovascular. So I actually left two things which are really my topic. One is venous thromboembolism, and the other one is vascular surgery in old age. So I plan to do these two topics in two videos, and venous thromboembolism I hope will be a small video, and I'm trying to do one in English, one in Malayalam. So this one is English. I hope people won't mind. This is mainly meant for all my friends, for not for the. Yeah, it is also meant for general people. So without much ado, I just go into why is venous thromboembolism is important. There are two words in this thromboembolism: thrombus and embolism. Thrombus, as you all know, is a clot in a blood vessel. Thrombus, blood vessel or heart or brain, it's all called a thrombus. So when the clot travels from one place or the place of his birth to a different location in the body, it's called an embolism. So what happens in venous thromboembolism? The clot actually forms in various peripheral parts of the body, like lower limbs, mainly lower limbs, but upper limbs also possible. And then it travels to the lungs mainly. Lungs means from the lungs it goes to the pulmonary arteries. Lungs means it's a pulmonary artery. It goes to the heart actually. It goes to the heart and blocks the blood supply to the pulmonary blood supply to the heart. Heart receives blood from the oxygenated blood from the lungs. After getting oxygenated in the lungs, the blood goes to the heart. So that is brought to the heart by the pulmonary veins. Here what happens is, the lungs supplied by two pulmonary arteries from the right atrium, which takes desaturated or little deoxygenated blood to the lungs for oxygenation. But here it's not possible because the clot travels from the lower limb mainly, especially from above the knee joint veins, that is the veins in the thigh, the pelvis, and the inferior vena cava, from the lower limb and the pelvic vein, it goes to the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava is formed by the two iliac veins. That is the pelvic veins. The leg veins are called the femoral veins. I think everybody knows it. So from the inferior vena cava, it will go to the right atrium. From the right atrium, it goes to the blood goes to the pulmonary arteries. Single big pulmonary trunk divides into branches, goes to both lungs. So that clot, if it is big enough, it can block the main trunk of the pulmonary artery, producing the classical symptoms of pulmonary embolism. We'll come to the symptoms of pulmonary embolism later on. So that's why uh, venous thromboembolism is a killer, is so dangerous because it goes and blocks the pulmonary arteries and kills the person, or it produces disease in the lungs, which debilitating disease in the lungs. That's why. Then, so that's a complication of deep vein thrombosis. So, I said deep vein thrombosis mainly happens in the lower limbs, but why does it happen more often in old people? You may ask that question. Because as you get older, you have the perfect condition in the blood vessels to fulfill the criterion for this thing, thrombosis, according to Virchow's triad. Virchow means Virchow. Was a German physician. He was physician and a politician, and all those days people used to be politicians, historians, everything all rolled into one. So Virchow was one such person. So Virchow proposed that people get thrombosis because there is stasis of blood. The blood is not flowing well. So in old age, blood will not flow well, because old people mainly suffer from many conditions which retard the flow of blood. The foremost being what's called a congestive cardiac failure. The heart does not pump the blood, so it collects in it is in a stagnant state. That is Virchow's first triad. Second triad is the endothelium, or the lining of the blood vessel, gets damaged. That is with reference to the arterial system. Arterial system get what's called a atherosclerotic damage to its endothelial lining, and so it predisposes to thrombosis again. But I said the artery, more common in artery, the second hypothesis, but it can the same thing. Atherosclerosis happens in veins also. You must see I always see the veins of people, old people, when I do this arteriovenous fistula for dialysis fistula creation. Some of the veins you must see, they are as thick as arteries. Not because they are arterialized already, because of atherosclerotic changes. So it can affect the veins also. The same process affects, but more often in the artery. So that's why Virchow's second the postulate is more common in the artery. The third one, what is said is that the clotting factors in the blood will get deranged, or it becomes increased. That also happens when you become old. The clotting factors go up, and in the body there is another balancing thing called a fibrinolytic system, which breaks down the clots. That system goes down. So the net result is a tendency to get a clot, more often in the veins. That's why in old people there is a tendency to get deep vein thrombosis. How much? What's the relative risk compared to a person 40 years, a 75-year-old man compared? How often would you think they would get? What would be the relative risk? It's hundreds of times, not 100. It's about 1,000 times more. A 75-year-old man has 1,000 times more chance of getting a DVT than a 40-year-old man. So that's why it's more common in the old age. So everybody knows about diagnosis of DVT. DVT presents as a unilateral swelling of the lower limb, or the upper limb for that matter. Upper limb swelling is more often associated with, it is probably seen in people having this thrombophilia, or clotting disposition. It may be younger people having clotting disposition, but it can happen in old people also, and also people having what's called Paget Schreiter syndrome. That is, Page means the vein, the subclavian vein gets obstructed in the between the clavicle and the this one first rib, between the clavicle and the first rib. So that will predispose to thrombosis of the upper limb. That can also lead to complication of the main complication is pulmonary embolism. Another thing is swelling of the upper limb. Massive swelling in the upper limb. In the lower limb, mainly it is the thigh swelling. Contrary to what we are taught in for MBBS days, these are not painful swelling. Deep vein thrombosis is not a painful swelling of the lower limb. Painful swelling means it's more likely an inflammatory process. Of course, deep vein also causes some amount of inflammation, but not that much. Just swelling. Painless swelling means DVT, unless otherwise proved. Take it from me. Painless unilateral swelling in an old man of 60, or for that matter, anybody who has a well score for getting. Well score means it's a risk factor for getting a DVT. If anybody has been immobilized for past 3 days or hospitalized for within the past 3 months for anything, and lying down for a long time, or anybody suffering from cancer for that matter, or anybody who has had a serious medical illness like cardiac failure, or he has this inflammatory bowel disease, or nephropathy, all those things, the first thing you have to consider is, if somebody comes with swelling of that thing, first thing is DVT. And to prove your point, there is only one investigation. Actually, there are 2, but main thing is ultrasound, the Doppler of the lower limb. That will show deep vein thrombosis in most cases. If it is clinically suspected, most cases it will show. If it has not shown, means there is something wrong somewhere. Then you can do what's called a D-dimer test. D-dimer test, the clotting, the broken clots in the blood, the D-dimer fraction of that clot. So D-dimer, if the D-dimer is high, again it is DVT unless proved otherwise, or you have some other, but D-dimer is a very non-specific test. So if somebody has no D-dimer, then you are happy that he does not have DVT. But if he has a D-dimer positive, that does not prove that he has DVT. That is a hiccup over there. So any lower limb swelling, unilateral, one side, not both sides, and thigh swelling, not the leg swelling. But rarely they get calf swelling. Calf swelling can be there, but it is not that important. Because why the thigh swelling is important is that with thigh swelling they may have, it's called proximal DVT. Proximal, that includes the thigh vein as well as the pelvic vein is blocked. So once the pelvic vein is blocked, it's called iliac vein thrombosis. That predisposes to pulmonary embolism. A large percentage of pulmonary embolism, 30 to 40%, in fact, of people having iliac vein can have pulmonary embolism. So this is the diagnosis, and the complication is mainly pulmonary embolism. The pulmonary embolism has also got a well score. You can make a clinical diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. The person having a DVT has a pulse rate more than 100, always suspect pulmonary embolism. Or if it desaturates, definitely pulmonary embolism. He has a syncopial attack, pulmonary embolism. He has a hemoptysis, pulmonary embolism. Then he has a chest pain, pulmonary embolism. Because pulmonary embolism is especially in old people, turns fatal most of the time. See, about 30 in young people, maybe with pulmonary embolism, only 2 to 3% will die. But with a pulmonary embolism, there are pulmonary embolism grades are there: massive, submassive, severe, moderate, mild. If anybody gets massive pulmonary embolism, it's sudden death. Sometimes he dies first before he make a diagnosis. So pulmonary embolism is important. So you always suspect pulmonary embolism in a person having a lower limb DVT, the thigh DVT. Always make a diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. Clinically, you check with ECG, you will see some right heart strain there. So we say what is called the L1, this one now. S1. S1 means in the lead one you see the thing S waves. Normally see an upright in the lead one. S wave, then Q3, T3, Q wave, downward wave in lead 3, and a T wave inversion in lead 3. That is L1, Q3, T3. Then you can get this right ventric RB, right bundle branch block, all those things. ECG changes there, but it's not so much. If you suspect pulmonary embolism, straight away take the patient for pulmonary CT pulmonary angiogram, not CT. No, CT between pulmonary, catheter angiogram, pulmonary angiogram, and CT pulmonary angiogram, there's very little difference. Maybe 2%, 3%. That's all. 97% equivalent. Before we used to do what's called ventilation perfusion scan, mismatch scan. But that is, I don't know where exactly. I think I had done when I was a student doing this thing, vascular surgery. But after that, I have not seen. It's all CT pulmonary, multi-slice CT pulmonary angiogram. You make a definite diagnosis of pulmonary embolism. Coming to treatment, the DVT treatment as well as pulmonary embolism treatment, first thing you give anticoagulation. Anticoagulation is the clotting, anti-clotting medicines are given. And of which the best thing is a low molecular weight heparin. Low molecular weight heparin adequate dose. There is another low molecular weight heparin. That is Cluxane is there. So many things are there, low molecular weight. Another thing is Fondaparinux. Fondaparinux is a once daily heparin. So you can give unfractionated heparin also. Especially unfractionated heparin may be preferred if you have a renal problem. If there's a kidney failure, the kidney, this thing, what is called that, the filtration rate is low. Then you have to give, you should not give low molecular weight heparin because it can accumulate. It can lead to more bleeding. It is because heparin is metabolized in the kidneys, so you cannot give low molecular weight. It's not metabolized much. So you have to give unfractionated heparin. But when you are giving unfractionated heparin, check with what is called APTT. APTT, a test. There is another test called prothrombin. That is for the anticoagulant. VK, vitamin K antagonist anticoagulant. This is APTT. So APTT test, and the APTT should be at least twice your normal level when you have to have a good anticoagulation. And if you are giving, then along with the heparin, you always start VKS also, vitamin K antagonist also, because the vitamin antagonist generally takes 2 to 3 days for some. It depends on the person's metabolism. Sometimes it takes up to 5 days to really act and get a good anticoagulation. So that value, that prothrombin value, it's measured in what's called INR, International Normalized Ratio. So the INR, you always aim to have an INR of between 2 and 3. If you have 2.5 INR after about 5 weeks of anticoagulation with low molecular weight heparin, then you can happily stop low molecular weight heparin. The only place Sometimes you continue low molecular weight heparin in preference to VKA is if the person has suffering from active cancer, because active cancer predisposes to recurrent thromboembolism and pulmonary embolism. So always consider continuing the anticoagulation through low molecular weight heparin for a period of 6 months. Otherwise, you can give this VK and check the INR at least once in 3 weeks. Once in 3 weeks. Keep the INR between 2 and 3. Because if you have the bleeding, the thing with the VK, generally what we use is what's called warfarin or acetro. I generally use acetro, but most people use warfarin. Warfarin is the bleeding risk is directly related to the INR produced by giving warfarin. If the INR is say 3, the risk is not so much. But if the INR is 5, the risk triples. More than 5 triples again, like that. So if the INR is around 8 or 10, you have to give immediate clotting factors. The clot and vitamin K by injection. Vitamin K is low IV, and taking care of any anaphylaxis that can happen. Very rarely it happens. Vitamin K is fairly safe. You can give it slowly, IV, about 1 ampule is given. Or you can give what's called the clotting factor, concentrate. At least 2, 5, 7 should be there. In our place, what we give is this one, FFP. FFP is given, about 5 units will be given. That is if the person has actually got bleeding. Bleeding generally happens, old people bleeding comes in the brain, because old people has a predisposition to bleed in the brain. They have, I think I had mentioned a condition called leukoariosis in the brain. That's a white matter change in the brain. It also predisposed to this one dementia and all those things, but it also predisposed to bleeding diathesis, bleeding problem. So intracranial bleeding is the main difficulty with vitamin K antagonists. Nowadays, instead of vitamin K antagonists, we have got some what's called a 10A inhibitor. One is called a drug called rivaroxaban, given in a dose of 15 milligrams BD initially for about 20 days, then go on with 20 milligrams every day for the next duration of treatment. By the way, duration of treatment is minimum is 3 months, but if it is an unprovoked DVT, there are 2 kinds of DVT. If somebody has had a hospitalization, or he has some disease which has caused the DVT, is called provoked DVT. There is a reason for that. So if it's unprovoked, it's mostly because the clotting factors are working against it. In that case, or he has a malignancy. So in that case, you have to continue anticoagulation minimum 6 months or indefinitely, sometimes indefinitely. So that is the duration of this thing. But the main thing is bleeding. So nowadays they have this rivaroxaban is there, 10A inhibitor. That is the one which is actually FDA approved. Then the dabigatran is another. There's a direct thrombin inhibitor. Dabigatran, it's called dabigatran. 150 milligram. 150 milligram BD you have to give. The treatment. But you see, these new drugs acts. You don't have to give heparin along with it, because it acts within about 3 hours. But as about all new drugs, always be careful, because you don't know. It has to be there for some more time, Actually, there is a criteria in the UK. It's called NICE. They do not recommend all these things. They just say warfarin is better. So maybe the warfarin is better. It's cheaper, but the downside is it has got a lot of interaction with drugs. For example, if you are using macrolide antibiotic, or if you are using antifungal, it can increase with the anticoagulation. So another thing is bleeding. So VKI is cheaper. It is around for a long time. We know what will happen with it. So, but the main thing is bleeding. So, in non-critical cases, probably you may give the newer anticoagulants, Novox they are called. Then regarding pulmonary embolism treatment is again anticoagulation is in mild, moderate, severe, submassive anticoagulation. But massive, even submassive, give what's called thrombolysis. Thrombolysis we generally give using this urokinase or streptokinase, and also these drugs, the plasminogen activators. Are there. Generally nowadays we give plasma. Only thing is it's a bit expensive. The another thing is just like giving thrombolysis for myocardial infarction. Here also we can give an intravenous thrombolysis. We not give a catheter directed thrombolysis. Of course, catheter-directed thrombolysis would be more specific or more effective. If, for example, if you are trying to put a big catheter for sucking out the pulmonary embolus, in that case, we can give a local because that will produce less intense thrombolysis, local thrombolysis. So, and clinically better. So that's a treatment for pulmonary embolism, supportive treatment, oxygen, all those things. Then the sequelae of getting a pulmonary embolism is that you can have recurrent pulmonary embolism means pulmonary hypertension. Then DVT, the main sequelae is what's called post-thrombotic syndrome. That is, you will get leg ulceration. So one major treatment or one main treatment for thromboembolism in the leg, thrombosis in the leg is giving graduated compression stocking. Then another part of, if it can't talk, it won't stop. It's a big topic. But I hope it can make it. Oh, it's already 28 minutes. And just passing, the prophylaxis has to be done. If you think a person is a high risk for getting a DVT, especially when you're going for surgery, please give a prophylaxis, especially surgeries like prolonged surgery, like joint replacement, or even general surgery. If it's prolonged, you have to give prophylaxis. Prophylaxis preferably ideally started before the surgery, but if there is a bleeding risk, you can start even after surgery, within 8 hours. And it has to be continued for depending upon for example, if you replace the new joint, you have to give it for a minimum 30 days. These are the things, and I hope some of you would comment and ask some questions, so I'll be happy to give it. I have some expertise in this. Thank you very much. Good night.